Hi, welcome to Wild Stroud's first teaching video, I suppose. I'm really sorry we're not with you for the workshop in person. We were really excited about it and looking forward to it. But this is what we've got. So this is going to be about 20 minutes on water in a wildlife garden with a particular focus on microponds. And rather than say any more, let's get going. What will you need in the next 20 minutes? Well, some A3 paper if possible, so you might want to stop the video and go and get some. If not, A4 will do, but the bigger the better. Your favourite pens, so you can do some drawings. Pencil will do if you haven't got pens, but could be fun to make some colours in your garden and as part of your designing. If you've done a workshop with us before and you've got drawings from those workshops, it might be useful to have those to hand. I think you'll need about 20 to 30 minutes if you use this as a mini workshop. I'm going to give you some information and I'm going to get you to stop and do some thinking. For those of you who haven't done anything with Wild Stroud before, then I'm just going to give you a quick recap on some of the things which we think are particularly important for wildlife gardens. The bigger, the better, and the more connected, the better. If you're not connected to neighbours and you can persuade them to make holes in their hedges so wildlife can move in between, so much the better. If you've got a green lane near you or you back onto fields, make holes so the wildlife can get through. Could be a problem if that's rabbits, but you decide. But even within your garden, you can think about connectivity. If you've got tadpoles in your ponds at the moment, once those frogs come out, how are they going to get from the pond through into some of the thick undergrowth? Have you got some nice planting which will give them cover the moment they come out of the pond? Most frogs and certainly toads don't live in ponds the whole time. So think about that. If you have areas of your garden, how will the wildlife transition from one part to another? We're encouraging people to stay native, and within Europe is native, but particularly thinking about here in the Cotswolds, what have we got? And we've got a fabulous array of plants in the small areas of commons and wild meadows that we've got that you can bring into your garden. They're available. And I'm blown away by the number of native plants there are for bog gardens and ponds, even small micro ponds. So we'll talk a little bit about that later, and I'm putting up a list on the website of the things that I'm finding. Make your changes slowly. If this is the first time you've thought about a wildlife garden, take your time, watch what's out there, and that's going to come up in a moment as well. Just take time to watch what's happening. There'll be things in your garden which are really good for wildlife, and there'll be things that aren't so good, and it's a really good idea to have time to think about it. Plan for the future. We're not going to be moving in our agricultural habits particularly quickly to change. So the more we can design for wildlife at the moment, but also think about it's going to get hotter and drier for spells. It's going to be wetter for prolonged periods of time, as we've seen this winter. So do think about the future. Perhaps some of the plants you've got now won't make it. But again, that's part of watching what works and what doesn't. If you've never done anything, go through a season mostly finding out what you've already got. And if you're tempted to buy more plants, try to buy perennial plants. A, it's easier for you, and B, often it's much, much better for the pollinators. Okay, so that's a quick recap. The most important thing is do something. Whatever excites you as a project, get on and do it. And if we can persuade you that's micro ponds, so much the better. Quick look at ways to provide water in your garden. Go on, stop the video, make a list. What are your ideas? Think of all the ways which you could provide water in your garden for wildlife. I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to give you my list. It's not comprehensive, but you can check it against your list if you've stopped the video and had a look. Ponds. obviously ponds, big ponds, small ponds, lots of ponds. Depends on the side of your garden. Obviously, if you're in a small garden, my next point, micro ponds is going to be much better. And this part of this presentation was written and inspired by Gypsy, who lives in Stroud and has 14 ponds in her small little garden. And I love going there and having a look at them. And a lot of the photos that I've used come from her garden. Bird baths, really important for birds to keep their feathers in good condition, keep themselves clean, keep the dust out. I know they're dust baths, but they also like to wash. They particularly like moving water, which we'll come to. Bog gardens, can you make an area boggy, perhaps where you've got a downpipe or you're able to collect water so that you can constantly drip it into a garden, because there's lots of brilliant pollinators for insects, and lots of insects really like that marshy land. It's perfect for them. Rainwater gardens, again, people often make those from at the end of their gutters and let the rainwater go into those and use it as a soak up. The Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust have done a lovely article on how to make a rainwater garden, which we'll have on the website for you. Drinking, vital for drinking, mammals in your garden, but also, did you know bees need to drink, and we can provide for them? They get really thirsty, easily dehydrate in hot summers. So how we present our water for them makes a difference, because they do drown in deep water. And also lots of animals, amphibians, love fountains or flowing water. You'll see birds, if you can make a little stream, you'll see birds in it having a wash. I've got fish in one of my ponds, they love it. Not that I particularly like the fish, but we just noticed that moving water attracts birds an awful lot, and also flowing water into your ponds can help them stay healthy. Okay, next list to be done. What about all the ways you could save water? Water is an incredibly important resource, and as the population escalates, as we all have really high expectations of being able to turn on our tap and always have water, I think we need to rethink all of that, and we need to think about using water wisely. I was once a few years ago in San Francisco, and there was no water available. It was rationed, and we had to collect 2 buckets of water in the morning for flushing the toilet in emergencies, and you had to plan your showers around availability when it was your turn to get water. We're not there yet in the UK. In fact, we're spoiled here in the UK. And maybe because it's rained so much, you feel that there's no need, but why not? Why not collect that rainwater? Why not save the water? Really good for the environment to do that, and really good for your micro ponds. So get your list out. What ways could you save water in your garden? Okay, here are some of our suggestions, and this list is not exhaustive, I should say. Get that right. Water butts and watering cans, dead easy to fix to downpipes, and recommend buying a butt with a stand, or making sure that you've got some breeze blocks or some way of elevating it so you can get your watering can underneath. You can buy it so you can string several together. Have lots, collect off greenhouse roofs, collect off shed roofs. I'm even collecting off my neighbour's roof because they can't, because of where their front door is, so I'm collecting it, or going to be collecting it as soon as we can get up there and get the pipe fixed. Hoses, dead easy to turn your hose on. We're suggesting a trigger hose, but also last summer I set up a timer on my hose pipe, and once a day I filled a bucket, and I had a micro irrigation system running off that just onto my rows of beans or peas or whatever I was growing at the time. So not hosing over the whole garden. I'm personally moving away for some pots. I don't need to have pots in my garden. I'll keep a few, but I've got a big enough garden to plant most of my things, which is much healthier for them. If you've got a lot of pots, then think about having glazed pots, because that holds water in, or if you've still got plastic pots, they will hold the water in, but also putting them in saucers so that if you overwater them, it soaks back up. Just a thought, if you do end up buying some plastic pots with no holes in the bottom, one little tip is that you make holes in your pot for when it rains and they get soggy, but make them about 4 or 5 centimeters up the side of the pot. So there's always a reservoir of water in the bottom. That will mean that you, if the soil dries out, it can soak back up when you do water them. Mulching makes a huge difference. It keeps the water in the ground. Mowing less. You know, you're exposing your grass to the elements. If you cut it short, it's going to evaporate much more quickly. So, you know, there are other benefits to not mowing, which we've talked about on other workshops, to do with grasses and habitats for wildflowers, for animals and insects, but even for water retention, mow less. No, we're not saying don't mow at all. It's lovely to have paths through your garden and other things. If you mow only 2 or 3 times a month, you know, daisies will come up. There'll be lots of other things in there, but choosing to mow less is a really good idea. We suggest that you water in the morning. Choose your time of day to water, and watering in the morning is suggested. If I'm honest right now, I think I always used to water in the evening, and I can't think why I used to water in the evening, because if I water in the evening, often the slugs come out and eat the plants overnight, especially my veggie patch. Where have I got to? Right, save grey water. If there's any way you can save any of your waters from anything, then please do so. And think about some irrigation system, even if it's recycling a plastic pot and make a few holes in the top and turn it upside down in your pot so it drips in regularly. There are all ways in which we can use less water because we're keeping something constantly hydrated rather than letting it dry out and rehydrate. Okay, you may have some other ones. If you have, let us know. So let's come back to why are we saying ponds or micro ponds or big ponds are so important for gardens? Well, 70% of ponds have been lost from the UK countryside. That's an awful lot of ponds. And the thing is that ponds support more invertebrates and have a larger number of rare animals than rivers. And we can control the pollution in our ponds. You know, many of our rivers are starting to recover as we pay more attention to the conditions of them, but we can really protect a huge number of invertebrates in our ponds. And 2/3 of all of Britain's freshwater plants and animals are found in ponds. So that's a huge number that we can protect. And what's amazing is how do they arrive? You know, you can start a brand new pond, and if you start to monitor the water, you'll be amazed how quickly things find their way into your pond. So what is a pond? What's the definition of a pond? What makes a pond? This just looks like 2 puddles in a field where it's flooded. And don't be fooled about that. Have you ever been up on a moorland where actually you suddenly come across a whole load of toad spawn or frog spawn in a puddle and you think, oh, poor things? Well, some ponds, I like that, you know, they start because it's rained a lot. And some of them survive, perhaps not the whole year, but they'll survive long enough for those tadpoles to hatch and to grow into little frogs or toads and to move on to the next part of their life. But there's a definition. Doesn't matter if it's man-made or natural. Don't differentiate there. Somewhere between 1 metre square and 2 hectares. That's enormous, a 2 hectare pond, but they exist. There's one down in Wales on the south coast. Amazing. Hectares of ponds full of water lilies with bridges across. You can walk across. It's absolutely amazing. There must be a fabulous amount of wildlife in those ponds and absolutely beautiful to go to. A pond needs to hold water for 4 months of the year, or 4 months or more. So, you know, there you go. 4 months does something for wildlife. So you'll see later we say don't be too much in a hurry if your pond dries out a little bit to fill it up. It's not necessary. because there are semi-seasonal ponds and temporary ponds, and as long as they're 4 months or more, they'll be supporting some wildlife, which is important. Okay, pond quiz time. A, B, C, D, E. Get your piece of paper out. What are they? What is each of those pictures? I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to reveal the answer. So if you want longer, stop the video. Toad spawn, smooth newt, water boatman, caddisfly larvae. They're weird looking, aren't they? And there are lots and lots of different types of larvae like that. If you go on the internet and put in caddisfly larvae, you'll be amazed at the extraordinary shapes that they evolve into. And then the final one is a common blue damselfly. And if you don't get those in your pond, it will be absolutely amazing. I get loads of them every summer, really beautiful. And the way you plant can really help make sure that you get those. Okay, hope you did well. And if in doubt on any of those, have a look up on the internet, put them in and search. There are lots of different water boatmen, so again, have a look around at the pictures on the web. Right, let's assume for a moment you're going to plan a pond. Let's have a look at how you make your pond most valuable for wildlife. And amazingly, that is all in those shallow areas. You can see the left-hand side is least wildlife friendly, and the right-hand side is most wildlife friendly. That 10 to 30 centimeters depth, where we're going to have lots of marginal plants, we have some real shallows, we're going to put some pebbles in there, some plants in there. And the deep water is less useful, but be clear, it's still useful. A frog, if you've got 60 centimeters of water in your pond, a frog may well go into that during the winter and spend the winter down underneath the water. And by the way, if you've ever seen a dead frog in your pond, it can be because your pond's frozen over completely, and the frogs just can't get back up to breathe and get out. And there are some tricks that you can do with that, like having a little fountain or keeping the water moving. Drop a tennis ball into your pond for the winter, because the wind will move it around and it's less likely to break. If you do get ice on your pond, I know I'm going off track now, but if you do get ice on your pond and you want to break it, then take some chunks of that ice out so that you create some space. Okay, so let's move on. Once you've got your pond up and running, you can start to test for your water quality. And there are really clear indicators. And you can do this by doing some pond dipping, get a nice fine net, swish it in through the pond into a little glass dish. Doesn't have to be a Petri dish. You don't need to buy anything special. But there are species which are really intolerant of poor water quality. And you can see here, group 1, an example of that is stonefly nymphs. If you're finding stonefly nymphs in your pond is in good condition. Moderately intolerant are damselfly nymphs. I know I've got those in my pond. I've seen them recently when I was moving some plants around. It's a really good indicator. So if you see damselflies in the summer laying eggs, it's a good thing to do to check out a bit later in the year. You know, have they hatched? If you've got fish, it's possible they got eaten, but good thing to look at. If the only thing you're finding is a black fly larva, well, it means you've got some work to do on your pond, keeping it healthy. And if you've got leeches in your pond, well, they're incredibly tolerant. But if that's all you've got, again, you've got some work to do on sorting out your pond to be better for wildlife than it currently is. Okay, time to take a break. I know, that was long. When I started this, I hadn't really thought about how long it would take. I said 20 minutes at the beginning, and actually the whole thing's about 35. So take a break, come back. I've divided the whole presentation into 2 sections. Go do something different for a while and then come back and watch the next one, which focuses on microponds. So hopefully you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you again in a bit.